It started with a whisper across the stars. Not a sound, but a signal so desperate it cut through the static of deep space like a cry in the night. For decades, Earth had known it wasn't alone. Telescopes, radio arrays, and deep space probes had all hinted at something out there. Civilizations older, smoother, and far more peaceful than humanity. They called themselves the Galactic Concord, a union of 12 species who'd long ago traded war for harmony, scarcity for abundance, and chaos for order. Their worlds were clean, quiet, and safe. Too safe, as it turned out. Because when the silent bloom came, they had no defense. It wasn't a bomb or an invasion. It was something far quieter and far deadlier. A microscopic entity, drifting between star systems like pollen on a cosmic wind. Where it landed, life didn't die screaming. It just softened. Plants lost their thorns. Animals forgot how to fight. Immune systems went quiet. Entire ecosystems collapsed into a gentle, dreamy stillness. Beautiful, but empty. The Concord watched helplessly as world after world fell silent, not with violence, but with surrender. Their science was advanced, elegant even, but it had never been tested by true hardship. Their bodies had been optimized for comfort over centuries. No plagues, no predators, no extremes. They'd erased struggle from their biology. And now, faced with a force that fed on passivity, they had nothing left to give. So they did something they'd never imagined. They asked for help. Not from another polished civilization. Not from some mythical ancient race. They sent their plea to Earth, the planet the Concord's own records labeled Tier 3 Deathworld. To them, Earth wasn't a cradle of life. It was a nightmare wrapped in blue and green, a place where the air could choke you, the ground could split open, and the oceans could rise and swallow cities whole, where viruses jumped from animals to humans in crowded markets, where children grew up knowing hunger or war or both, where people still died from things as simple as a cut or a fever, things the Concord hadn't seen in millennia. And yet, humanity was still here, not just surviving but thriving in the chaos. Building cities on fault lines, farming in deserts, diving into crushing ocean depths, climbing mountains so high the air turned thin and deadly. Humans didn't just endure Earth, they danced with its dangers. They learned its rhythms, respected its fury, and sometimes bent it to their will. That kind of resilience wasn't in any Concord database. It couldn't be simulated. It had to be lived. When the message arrived, translated into every major Earth language, broadcast on every channel, beamed into every satellite, the world didn't cheer. It argued. Governments debated. Scientists warned. Religious leaders spoke of omens. Conspiracy theorists claimed it was a trap. But beneath the noise, something else stirred. Not hope exactly, more like recognition. Because for all Earth's divisions, rich and poor, north and south, old grudges and new borders, everyone on this planet shared one thing. They knew what it meant to fight just to wake up tomorrow. Within weeks, a strange team began to form. Not generals or diplomats, but people who'd stared down death and blinked first. A woman who'd spent winters alone in a research hut above the Arctic Circle, surviving on dried fish and sheer will when her supply drone failed. A man who'd walked out of a collapsed mine in the Andes after 17 days with nothing but a pocket knife and rainwater collected in his boot. A community elder from a Pacific island who'd rebuilt her village 3 times after rising seas took it, each time using older, wiser methods passed down through songs and stories. They weren't heroes in the traditional sense. They were survivors. And that's exactly what the galaxy needed. The Concord expected polished envoys in sleek uniforms. What they got was a ragtag group in worn jackets, carrying gear that looked more like camping equipment than space tech. Their ship wasn't some gleaming vessel. It was a refitted ore hauler patched together with spare parts and stubbornness, nicknamed the Mule by its crew. Inside, the walls were lined with seed banks, soil samples, and jars of fermented remedies. One compartment held live scorpions. Another, mold cultures from Chernobyl. To the Concord, it looked like a biohazard. To the humans, it was a medicine cabinet. As the Mule approached the Concord's central station, a floating garden of glass and light orbiting a quiet star, the humans didn't marvel at the beauty. They studied the air vents, the emergency exits, the way the light reflected off the walls. Old habits, always scanning for threats even in paradise. When the airlock hissed open, The first thing the conquered delegation noticed wasn't the humans' faces. It was their eyes. Sharp, alert, never still. These weren't people who waited for problems to be solved. They solved them before they happened. One of the conquered leaders, tall and luminous with skin that shimmered like moonlight on water, stepped forward. Through a translator, they said, "We are grateful you came. We have prepared quarters, medical scans, and a full briefing on the silent bloom." The human in front, a woman with sun-weathered skin and hands calloused from years of field work, nodded politely. Then she asked, "Where's your mess hall? And do you have real coffee or just that nutrient paste your message mentioned?" The conquered blinked. No one had asked about food or coffee. They'd expected solemnity, reverence, maybe fear. Instead, they got practicality and a hint of dark humor. Later, over a cup of bitter, real-earth coffee, brewed from beans someone had smuggled in a sock, the humans listened to the full story of the bloom. They didn't interrupt. They didn't offer empty promises. They just absorbed it. The data, the grief, the shame in the conquered's voices when they admitted they'd never faced anything like this. When the briefing ended, the woman set down her cup. "You think this thing is unbeatable because it's too smart," she said quietly. "But on Earth we've got things just as clever. Fungi that control ants, viruses that rewrite DNA, bacteria that eat metal. We don't beat them by being stronger. We outlast them. We adapt faster." She leaned forward. "Your problem isn't that you're weak. It's that you forgot how to be tough." The conquered didn't understand, not yet. But they felt something shift in the room, like a door had opened to a world they'd erased from their history. Outside the station's viewport, stars burned cold and distant. But inside, for the first time in centuries, the Concord felt something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. And maybe, just maybe, a flicker of hope. Not because help had arrived, but because the help that came didn't look like saviors. It looked like survivors. And survivors, Earth had proven again and again, know how to bring others back from the edge. The galaxy had begged. Humanity's Deathworlders had answered. Now the real work would begin. The first few days aboard the Concord station felt like stepping into a dream. Too clean, too quiet, too perfect. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something floral, like a garden after rain. The floors were warm underfoot. The lights adjusted automatically to your mood, and every surface gleamed like it had just been polished. To the humans it felt wrong. Not dangerous exactly, but fragile, like if you sneezed too hard the whole place might crack. The Concord hosts were polite, almost painfully so. They offered soft robes, nutrient-rich meals shaped like art, and rooms with walls that changed color to soothe your mind. But the humans kept their own clothes. They ate their own rations, dried meat, hard biscuits, packets of spicy paste that made the Concord observers flinch. One of them even slept on the floor the first night, saying the bed was too soft to trust. The Concord didn't understand. Why refuse comfort? Why carry dirt under your nails when you could be clean? They watched the humans with a mix of awe and confusion, like they were studying wild animals that had somehow learned to speak. Then came the accident. It happened in Lab 7, where the Concord was keeping a sealed sample of the silent bloom for study. A tiny fracture in the containment unit, no bigger than a hair, let a wisp of the pathogen escape. Alarms didn't blare. Lights didn't flash red. The system simply logged the breach and sent a calm notification to maintenance. To the Concord, it was a minor glitch. To the humans, it was a 5-alarm fire. Before the Concord scientist could even finish reading the alert, the humans were moving. One grabbed a fire blanket from the wall, meant for electrical fires, not biological ones, and draped it over the vent. Another pulled out a small kit, mixed salt, vinegar, and a pinch of something dark from a tin and smeared it around the seal. A third started opening windows, well, the station's version of windows, forcing airflow to dilute the threat. "What are you doing?" a Concord scientist asked, voice trembling. "You're contaminating the protocol." "No," came the reply, calm but firm. "We're buying time." They didn't wait for permission. They didn't run simulations. They acted fast, messy, and effective. Within minutes, the spread was contained. The bloom, used to passive hosts, didn't know how to handle sudden changes in pH, temperature, and airflow. It stalled, confused. Later in the debriefing room, the humans explained, "On Earth, you couldn't always wait for the perfect solution. Sometimes you used what you had, spit, duct tape, and stubbornness. They'd learn to improvise because the alternative was death. Your labs are beautiful, one of them said, but they're built for problems that play by rules. The real world doesn't. The Conquered was stunned, not just by the action but by the mindset. These humans didn't see danger as something to avoid. They saw it as something to negotiate with, to outthink, to wear down. Over the next few days, the humans began asking questions, not about the bloom's structure or genetic code, but about the worlds it had touched. What did the soil smell like before it fell silent? Did birds still sing? Did children play outside? The Conquered struggled to answer. They'd been so focused on data, they'd forgotten the life that data represented. Then, one evening, something shifted. A young Concord researcher, barely more than a student, approached the humans during a quiet moment in the observation lounge. She held a small device that projected images. A forest on her homeworld, once vibrant with bioluminescent trees and singing insects. Now it was still, silent, beautiful but empty. My grandmother used to take me there, she said, her voice soft. She said the trees whispered secrets if you listened long enough. Now, they don't whisper anything. One of the humans looked at the image, then at the girl. On my island, they said, we believe silence isn't empty. It's waiting. And sometimes, you have to make noise to wake it up. The next morning, the humans requested access to a sealed greenhouse on the station, a place the Conquered used to grow decorative plants. They wanted to run an experiment. Reluctantly, permission was granted. What followed wasn't science as the Conquered knew it. It was more like gardening mixed with guerrilla warfare. The humans brought in soil from Earth, dark, rich, and teeming with microbes. They planted fast-growing weeds, introduced mold spores, even added a few drops of seawater full of unknown plankton. Then they exposed a corner of the greenhouse to a diluted sample of the bloom. The Conquered watched in horror as the bloom began to spread, turning leaves silver, slowing growth, quieting the hum of pollinators they'd engineered into the space. But then something unexpected happened. The earth weeds didn't die. They fought back. Their roots released acids. Their leaves secreted bitter oils. The mold formed a network underground, sharing warnings like a nervous system. Within 48 hours, the bloom's advance had slowed, then stopped. It wasn't eradicated, but it was resisted. The Conquered scientists stared at the data, then at the patch of wild, unruly green in their perfect garden. For the first time, they understood. Life on Earth wasn't just surviving chaos, it was using it. Conflict wasn't a flaw. It was fuel. That night, the humans gathered in their quarters, sharing a pot of strong tea brewed from dried leaves. No one spoke for a while. They were tired, far from home, surrounded by beings who saw the universe as a place of order, but they also felt something rare: purpose. One of them looked out the viewport at the stars and said, "They think we're here to fix their problem, but maybe we're here to remind them that life isn't supposed to be safe." The others nodded. They knew what came next wouldn't be easy. The bloom was clever. The Concord was untested. And Earth's ways, rough, messy, sometimes brutal, might not be welcome for long. But they also knew this: when the universe sends a plague that feeds on peace, the only answer might be the people who never had the luxury of peace to begin with. And so, while the Conquered slept in their quiet, perfect rooms, the humans stayed awake, checking seals, testing air filters, whispering plans in low voices. Not because they distrusted their hosts, but because on a death world you learn early. Comfort is temporary. Vigilance is forever. The galaxy had begged for saviors. What it got were survivors, and survivors don't wait for miracles. They make them. Things got serious fast after the greenhouse experiment. The Conquered scientists couldn't deny it anymore. Earth life didn't just survive the silent bloom. It pushed back. But that raised a new question, one that made everyone uneasy. How far were they willing to go? The humans knew the answer wasn't in labs or data streams. It was in the places on Earth where life clung on by its fingernails, where the air burned your lungs, the water could kill you, and the ground itself seemed to want you gone. Places like the cracked salt flats of Ethiopia, where bacteria thrived in pools hot enough to boil eggs. Or the frozen ruins of old nuclear zones, where fungi grew in total darkness, feeding on radiation like it was sunlight. Or the deep ocean trenches, where creatures lived under pressure that would crush a submarine like a soda can. To fight the bloom, they needed samples from those places. Not just dirt or water, but living things. Microbes that had spent millions of years learning how to say no to death. Back on Earth, the request caused an uproar. Governments argued. Environmental groups warned against cosmic biopiracy. Some called it reckless, shipping Earth's most dangerous organisms into space like they were tools, not living things with their own balance to keep. Others feared what might happen if those samples escaped, or worse, if other species tried to weaponize them. But the humans on the station didn't see it that way. To them, these weren't weapons. They were teachers. Every mold, every extremophil, every hardy weed carried lessons written in DNA. How to endure. How to adapt. How to live when everything says you shouldn't. Still, the weight of the choice pressed down hard. One of them stared at a photo sent from home. A child playing near a river, unaware that the microbes in that water might soon be shipped across the galaxy. "We're not just sharing science," they said quietly. "We're sharing pieces of our world. And once it's out there, we can't take it back." Meanwhile, aboard the station, something else was happening. One of the humans started running a fever. At first, it seemed like a simple infection, maybe from a cut or recycled air. But then their skin took on a faint silver sheen and their breathing slowed too much, too calm. The bloom had gotten in. Not through a breach this time, but through a moment of tiredness, a slip in protocol, a single breath in the wrong corridor. The Concorde panicked. They wanted to isolate the person immediately, put them in stasis, maybe even jettison the whole module. But the others refused. "You don't lock up your own," one said, voice sharp. "You fight for them." What followed wasn't high-tech medicine. It was raw human stubbornness. They wrapped the sick one in cold cloths soaked in vinegar and salt. They forced bitter teas down their throat, brews made from roots and bark that tasted like fire. They kept them talking, moving, angry, because anger meant the mind was still fighting. And slowly something strange happened. The silver faded. The fever broke. And when they tested the person's blood, they found something no one expected. The bloom was still there, but changed, twisted, like it had tried to take over, and the human body had rewritten it. That's when it hit them. Humanity wasn't immune to the bloom, they were a crucible. Their bodies, shaped by centuries of plagues, famines, toxins, and stress, didn't just resist invaders. They absorbed them, studied them, and turned them into something new. It wasn't clean. It wasn't pretty. But it worked. The realization sent a chill through the team. If they shared this, if they let the Conquered use human biology as a template, they wouldn't just be helping. They'd be offering themselves as raw material, blood, tissue. Even children's immune systems could become the blueprint for a galactic cure. And once that door opened, who knew where it would lead? The Conquered, sensing a breakthrough, grew eager. Delegations from other species arrived, some grateful, others hungry-eyed. "Your biology is a miracle," one ambassador said, almost reverent. "Let us study it. Let us replicate it," but the words felt slippery. Study could mean respect, or it could mean harvest. The humans held a private meeting in their quarters, voices low, lights dimmed. No grand speeches, just honest talk. "If we give them what they want," one said, "Earth becomes the galaxy's immune system. Our kids might grow up knowing they're valuable not for who they are, but for what their bodies can do." Another added, "But if we don't, billions die, quietly, without even knowing why." There were no easy answers, only choices with consequences. In the end, they agreed on a line they wouldn't cross. No live human trials. No genetic patents. No turning people into resources. But they would share knowledge the old ways, the forgotten tricks, the wisdom that didn't come from machines, but from generations who learned to live with danger instead of pretending it didn't exist. They sent a message back to Earth. We need permission. Not just from governments, but from the people. From the villages, the tribes, the communities who kept these survival secrets alive. And to everyone's surprise, the answer came fast, not from presidents or CEOs, but from elders, healers, farmers, and fishers. "Take what you need," they said. "But tell the truth. Tell them life isn't about winning. It's about staying in the game." So the samples were sent, carefully sealed, respectfully labeled, not as weapons but as offerings. A handful of desert soil, a vial of deep-sea brine, a dried leaf from a tree that grew in radioactive earth. Each one carried a story, a warning, and a kind of hope. But as the cargo docked with the station, the humans felt no relief. Only gravity. Because now the real test began. Could they teach a galaxy that had forgotten struggle how to live with it, without losing themselves in the process? The bloom wasn't just out there in the stars, it was in the choices they made now. And on a death world, even kindness has teeth. The moment the Earth samples arrived, the station changed. Not in a dramatic way, no explosions, no alarms, but in the quiet hum of new routines. The conquered scientists, once so sure of their clean, controlled methods, now watched in awe as the humans mixed desert soil with bloom cultures, or dropped deep-sea microbes into sterile nutrient baths like tossing seeds into a storm. Nothing made sense by their standards, and yet it worked. But the real shift didn't happen in the labs. It happened in the halls, the gardens, the quiet corners where young conquered trainees gathered, wide-eyed and uncertain. They'd been raised to believe that order was safety, that harmony meant the absence of conflict. Now they were being asked to do something radical. Get dirty. The humans didn't hand them cures. They handed them shovels. Survival isn't something you download, one of them said, kneeling in a newly built training patch, a rough rectangle of real Earth soil trucked in from the cargo bay. It's something you feel in your hands, your lungs, your gut. They showed the trainees how to test soil by taste, just a pinch. Bitter meant alkaline, sour meant acidic. How to read the wind by the way dust moved. How to tell if water was safe not by a scanner, but by the bugs living in it. At first, the conquered youth fumbled. They dropped seeds. They flinched at the smell of compost. They asked, why not just use a machine? But slowly something clicked. When a simulated bloom fog was released in a training dome, it was a young Concord student, not a human, who remembered to burn dried sage to disrupt its spread, just like they'd seen done with wildfire smoke back home. Another used woven reeds to filter air, copying a technique from Earth's wetlands. They weren't curing the bloom, they were outmaneuvering it. The humans watched, not with pride, but with something deeper. Recognition. These weren't weak beings. They'd just never been given a chance to be strong, but not everyone welcomed this change. A faction within the conquered, older leaders, diplomats from the most refined worlds, grew uneasy. They saw the training patches as chaotic, the hands-on methods as reckless. You're teaching them to fear, one accused during a council meeting. We built a society without fear. Don't undo that. One of the humans stood up, not to argue, but to tell a story. On my island, they said, we have a saying, the calm sea does not make a skilled sailor. You didn't build a society without fear. You built one without practice. And when the real storm came, you had no sails to raise. Silence followed. Not angry silence, thoughtful. The turning point came during a joint exercise. The Concorde had designed a perfect simulation, a city under bloom threat with every variable controlled. But the humans added one twist. They cut the power halfway through. No lights, no comms, just darkness and uncertainty. Panic flared at first. Then something beautiful happened. The trainees didn't wait for orders. They used glow moss from the training patch to light paths. They shared body heat in groups. They listened for breath, for movement, for life. And when they found a contaminated zone, they didn't seal it off. They redirected airflow using sheets and fans, just like they'd practiced with smoke in the dome. Afterward, a conquered elder approached the humans, eyes glistening. We thought resilience was noise, they said. But it's just... Life turned up loud. From then on, the Deathworld Accord began to take shape, not as a treaty but as a promise. The humans would share knowledge, not bodies. Teach skills, not secrets. No genetic harvesting. No forced adaptation. Just the old ways. Observation, improvisation, and respect for the wild edge of existence. Back on Earth, news of the Accord spread. Not through headlines, but through word of mouth, in fishing villages, mountain towns, desert outposts. People sent messages, a child's drawing of a star with green vines growing around it, a recording of wind through redwood trees, a pouch of seeds from a garden that had survived 3 droughts. These weren't gifts for aliens. They were reminders. This is how we live. Not by conquering the world, but by learning its language. On the station, the humans started something new. They called it Wild Hours, a daily block of time where the station's systems were dialed back. Lights dimmed. Temperature varied. Sounds of earth, rain, birds, even thunder played softly through the halls. At first, the conquered found it unsettling, but soon they began to crave it, because in that controlled chaos they felt something they'd forgotten: aliveness. One evening, a group of conquered children sat with the humans, weaving vines into shelters, their fingers clumsy but determined. One asked, "Will the bloom come back?" "Probably," came the reply. "And when it does, you'll be ready, not because you're stronger, but because you'll know how to bend without breaking." That night, as the station drifted through silent space, the humans gathered on the observation deck. Below them, the training patches glowed faintly under moonlight filters, patches of earth stubbornly growing in alien soil. They missed home, missed the smell of rain on hot pavement, the sound of neighbors arguing over a fence, the weight of a real storm rolling in. But they also felt something rare, purpose that wasn't about winning, but about passing the torch. The galaxy hadn't needed saviors, it had needed teachers. And Earth, for all its scars, had always been good at teaching. Through fire, flood, and time. Now, the lesson wasn't just survival, it was how to live, fully, fiercely, and with eyes wide open, even when the universe tries to lull you to sleep. Years passed. The silent bloom didn't vanish, it never really does, but it stopped spreading. Not because it was destroyed, but because the worlds it touched had learned to stand their ground. Cities now had wild zones, patches of untamed earth where children learned to identify edible plants, where wind and rain were allowed to do their work, where silence wasn't emptiness, but space to listen. Schools taught not just math and history, but how to read clouds, purify water with sunlight, and calm a panicked mind with breath alone. The conquered hadn't become warriors. They'd become gardeners, tending not just to order, but to life in all its messy, unpredictable glory. And Earth? Earth stayed Earth. Still loud, still broken in places, still arguing with itself. But something had shifted in how people saw themselves. They weren't just survivors of a harsh planet anymore. They were keepers of a rare kind of wisdom, the kind that only comes from living on the edge and refusing to fall off. The humans who'd gone to the stars eventually came home, not as heroes with medals, but as quiet neighbors who sometimes stared too long at the sky or flinched at overly sterile rooms. They didn't give big speeches. They planted gardens, taught kids how to build shelters from branches, shared stories over campfires about a place where everyone was clean, safe, and almost lost everything because of it. One of them visited a memorial on Mars, not a grand monument, but a simple stone ring overlooking a valley where the first off-world Earth seeds had been planted. Names were carved into the rock, not generals or scientists, but ordinary people who'd volunteered, knowing they might not return. People who'd carried soil in their pockets like talismans, who'd hummed old songs to keep fear at bay, who'd chosen to help even when the galaxy had once looked down on them as barbaric. They placed a small pouch on the stone, filled with dirt from a riverbank back home, mixed with a pinch of dust from the conquered station. No words were spoken. None were needed. The gesture said it all. We met you in your broken place. You met us in ours. And somehow we both walked out. Back on Earth, life went on. Markets bustled. Storms raged. Children laughed in streets that flooded every spring. But now, when people looked up at night, they didn't just see stars. They saw neighbors. Flawed, fragile, trying their best. Just like us. The Concord never forgot what humanity gave them. Not a cure, but a compass. A reminder that safety without strength is just another kind of sleep. And in a universe full of wonders, the most dangerous thing isn't chaos. It's forgetting how to face it. Sometimes conquered ships would pass near Earth's orbit, not to study or trade, but just to listen. They'd tune into radio waves carrying music, arguments, weather reports, lullabies. To them it sounded like noise. To Earth it sounded like life. And after everything, the conquered had learned to love the noise. There were still tensions, of course. Not every species trusted Earth's wild ways. Some worried humanity would become arrogant, seeing themselves as the galaxy's immune system, its guardians, its judges. But the humans were careful. They refused special status, turned down offers of permanent embassies among the stars. We're not here to lead, one said during a rare galactic summit. We're here to remind you that you already have what it takes. You just forgot how to use it. That humility kept the peace. Not perfect peace, there's no such thing, but a working kind. Built on respect, not fear. And in quiet moments, when the weight of it all pressed down, the humans would gather, not in council halls, but around kitchen tables, campfires, or the decks of old fishing boats. They'd share tea, mend nets, watch the horizon. No grand plans, just presence, because after facing the end of worlds, they knew the truth. Survival isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up day after day for the people beside you. One evening, as the sun dipped below the ocean, someone asked, "Do you think they'll ever really understand us?" Another stirred their cup, steam curling into the cool air. They don't need to understand us. They just need to remember that life isn't meant to be polished. It's meant to be lived, rough edges and all. And that was enough. The galaxy had begged with all its might, sending signals across light years, offering riches, pleading for salvation. They expected angels, or warriors, or gods. What they got were people, tired, scarred, stubborn people who knew how to patch a roof in a storm, share the last bite of food, and keep walking even when every bone ached. Humanity's Deathworlders didn't save the galaxy with weapons or miracles. They saved it by showing that sometimes the strongest thing you can be is human, flawed, fierce, and forever learning how to bend without breaking. And in the end, that was the only answer the universe ever needed.